I am very joyous and feeling a tremendous amount of gratitude to have the opportunity today to be in this space with Imogen Weber. Thank you so much for taking this time with me. I appreciate that.
Thank you so much, Jeff, for having me.
Certainly. I would like to, if I could, start out the conversation. I tend to begin these a little more generally, so to speak, or a little more broadly. What I'd like to do, if I could, is ask you what your inner journey, or what you might refer to as a spiritual journey. I know on some level that it transcends the names, but I would love to hear what that means to you at a deeper level.
That's a good question. To me, it is coming to know oneself intimately as the self, as the divine being that we are, experiencing life in this humanness, certainly, but to know our fundamental primordial nature. I think this is the journey for me and has been for a while.
Thank you, and I really do honor that. I would also love to hear anything that you might share in terms of how this particular journey got started for you, and anything that you might share in terms of formative moments or lessons learned along the way.
Yeah, so I mean, it's quite a long story for me in many ways, in that it started very early for me. I was born into a family where my mother was a transcendental meditation teacher. And so I learned TM. I always forget how old I was, 5 or 6, somewhere in there.
Hmm. Oh,
And so
wow.
I, yeah, so I've been meditating for most of my life. And I went to the Maharshi School in the UK and also the university in America. But it wasn't for me the typical, although on the outside it looked like the typical seeker's sort of journey. Inwardly, at least for the formative years of my life, it was just as normal as brushing my teeth. I wasn't on this seeker's path thinking, enlightenment and all of these kind of things. So it was sort of, I guess, an inherited journey for me, initially at least, and one that I wasn't particularly sort of feverish for awakening, but something that kind of happened to me in many ways. Um, I think the most formative moment actually was when my best friend died, and my whole world sort of flipped on its head at that moment. And I think I would probably characterize that moment as sort of walking out of my life, and a deep sort of question of what am I doing here? Why am I doing all that I'm doing? What is this all about? Sort of came about in my heart, I would say, at that moment, in a moment of deep grief and heartbreak. Sort of cracked me open, I think. And so that was really quite a pivotal moment for me. I mean, I could name a number of other moments, but I would say that is probably the moment that um, I dedicated my life, I would say, in service of this quest of who am I? What is this all about? And to know, I guess, the depths of my heart, to know what that is. Um, and so, yeah, at that moment, myself and my husband, we were living in America, very much um, still involved in the TM movement. I was working for the university at the time, and I really didn't know anything else. He was the archetypal spiritual seeker that sort of was into all sorts, everything, had been in every avenue you can think of. But for me, I was very much one-pointed, just because I wasn't looking. I wasn't like seeking anything particularly in terms of spirituality. I was doing my TM meditation. I was doing it for many, many hours a day, and I'd had some really amazing experiences with that. But again, it wasn't that sort of seeking energy, I would say, until that sort of great transformation happened through grief. Um, and we sort of walked out of our lives and went and lived in an ashram and gave up everything. And I guess you could say the rest is history. Um, Yeah. So we went and lived with, I don't know if you've heard of Muji.
Oh,
Uh,
absolutely. Yes, I love him. Yes, I've actually been aware of him for a long time. Yeah, I absolutely
yeah.
love him. Yes.
Yeah. So we went and lived with him for about a year,
Oh,
and
wow.
we were
Yeah.
on his team there. And actually, it'd been my husband that was sort of done with all the seeking, and he reached out to another spiritual teacher at the time and received a Shaktipat transmission. And immediately I saw a shift in him, and it was undeniable. And he sort of left the ashram at that moment, having discovered what he was there for, really. And it took me about 6 months later to sort of follow him uh, along the path that he now found himself on. And I received a transmission myself. And again, that shifted things significantly for me in my life. Yeah, so that's broadly, yeah, what happened.
Thank you so much. And I'm so appreciative that you've shared this. The phrase that you used, and I am very sorry as well for what you experienced in terms of that grief. And I wanted to, the phrase, I never heard that before. And I get a sense intuitively, I'm open to being completely wrong, but I get a sense that there is so much more to that phrase, walking out of your life.
Yeah,
And in terms of the because I recognize we can do that in our outer, and I realize it's all one, but ultimately we have this outer life and then the inner life. And so I'm wondering if there's anything that in terms of what you share with people about that experience of walking out on your life, at least on the internal experience of that, or the inner experience of that.
yeah. I touched on it, this cracking open, and for me, they go hand in hand. Many people, they have their life all tightly bound up in their idea of who and what they are and their relationship to life. And what happened with that was this, I mean, it was catastrophic in its cracking open, but that's how I view it, is my whole life, all that I thought I was, all that I thought life was about, the reasons for doing everything, why we, have jobs and family and friends and material comforts and all of this. It's sort of, there was an emptiness that was felt in light of this deep unending, it felt in that moment, grief of it brought me to just fundamentally question, what is this? What is this life for? Why am I here? What am I doing here? Why am I making the choices and doing the things I'm doing? And none of it sort of made sense anymore. And it wasn't something that I chose to have happen, obviously. But there I found myself in this deep sense of, I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing, why I'm doing it. And to see how fragile life can be, I think was what was coming, was like, I felt life was so certain, so solid, and it wasn't at all. And so that's what I mean by walking out of my life, walking out of what I thought my life was, and why I thought I was doing what I was doing, suddenly not making sense. And you can't sort of come back from that. I feel it's like you have that, those cracks begin to show. You can't put it all back together no matter how much you tried. And I did actually try for a while. That event happened and I tried to put my life back together. I tried to sort of find myself back on the path that I was prior to that. And it just didn't work. It didn't make sense anymore. None of it made sense.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I wonder too, I'm just musing out loud here, what you, if I, if it would to be able to explore some of the some of the um in terms of some of the most healing, informative changes that have happened as a result of you questioning everything. If that makes sense or not. In other words, what things look like on the other side of that, so to speak.
Yeah, I'm not sure there is ever an other side of it. That I'm still wondering about the other side of it. But certainly,
or
I
at
know,
least
I know.
at least on the other side of that experience, as
Yes,
far as linearly speaking, just as
yes,
far as
yes,
in time, where I realize we don't always necessarily live in time, but yeah.
yes. No, I know what you mean, though. So I think for me, on the other side of that, um, I realized just how much I wasn't actually listening to myself. I was listening to the shoulds. I was listening to what I thought I should be, who I thought I should be, where I thought I should be. I was listening to all these sort of seemingly interior, but they were actually exterior, um, conditioned ideas and limits and views of what it is to be a human being in this world, how we should be, how we should behave, how we should speak, all of these shoulds. And I didn't even recognize them as such. And I didn't realize just how miserable I was because of that. And so I think this journey for me has been a journey of deeply, deeply, deeply listening to myself, to my heart, to the calling of life. And I think to be in service to that, that's what that has looked like on the other side of all of this, has been a continual surrender to the service of that calling. And some would call it a higher calling, some would call it, divine whisperings of life, you could say. Um, but yeah, it's been a continual surrender to that deep, unending listening of who and what I truly am, and what life is really calling for, that is not a conditioned calling, but is a true calling.
I deeply honor that. I really, really do. And I was going to ask you, I actually love when you had said, when I asked you the question about on the other side, and that really spoke to me when you had said that you're not sure that you are on the other side of that. It really, in my heart, it brought me back to my first recognition of what you were saying in terms of the truth of that for myself. I had a teacher, once the end of seeking started, once I recognized that seeking, that active seeking, was beginning to end. I had a teacher that always, the one thing that he would say is live in the question. And so I'm wondering if you have found that to be, if that would describe in some way what your experience has been since since that shift.
Yeah, it's like not trying to put anything back together again. And so you're constantly living in the free fall of the unknown, in the mystery. And in that, you find the freedom of life. That's what I've found anyway. And so, yes, there is a certain full stop you could speak of. And I think that's what you were referring to, is that sort of that full stop, that sense of recognition that brings one to a rest, that brings one to the sense of the peace in one's heart, that is, I know who and what I truly am. But the lived reality of that, the embodiment of that, the lived day to day unfolding of that recognition is unending, I feel, is a constant free fall, a constant flow of that mystery of life. And so it's like never putting it all back into certainty again. It's living in that unknowingness. And somehow there's this deep sense of known in that unknowingness. It's like as you're sort of living into that mystery, it's like life becomes more and more familiar, but somehow you don't need to know it. You're living it. You don't need to like understand it, I guess is a better way of putting that. I don't seem to need to understand it in the way I thought I once needed to. Now it's just each moment is lived, each moment is explored. I think the greatest thing that has come out of all of this is this sort of seeming curiosity, continuous curiosity of life. And that's quite joyful, I find.
Yes, and I recognize that is no small thing at all in terms of that openness to not knowing. And it would be very interesting to hear just in terms of what it was like for you. I didn't know if there was an aha moment in terms of your feeling called or led to work with people. It would be very interesting to hear, how that started and how that is, if it has evolved in any way, how that has been the case for you.
So I had what I'd call a big abiding shift in about 2015, I think it was. And uh, I never sought out to be, I call myself a mentor. Other people call me a teacher, but whatever this is, I never sought this out. And actually, I rejected it quite heavily for
Hmm.
a number of years. Even when I was starting to do it, I was still sort of 1 foot in, 1 foot out. This was never on my cards, on my plan of life, so to speak. But in 2017, I was invited to be initiated in giving Shaktipat transmissions, and even at the time, there was still this big no, this big sort of sense of, no, no, this is not what I want to be doing. I'm actually by nature quite shy. I'm very much an introvert, a hermit. The idea of sort of sitting in front of people, particularly in group settings, was, run for the hills kind of stuff for me. But in amongst that sort of the fearful no that was in my body, there was this deep sense of yes. And I couldn't escape that. I couldn't sort of, no matter how much I wanted to, it was still there. It still remained. And so I was initiated in, it was called Raza. And I began giving transmissions in late 2017. Um, it has evolved so much. I mean, you asked that question, has it evolved? I, it's almost night and day as to where I'm at now, and I imagine it will continue to evolve actually, as I evolve, as I learn more and more about myself and what it is to be embodied in this moment. That is constantly growing and evolving and deepening, as is therefore the work that I do with people is constantly growing and evolving and deepening. The transmission itself has changed vastly. There's been a whole relationship with that, and what's happened there has greatly changed. And yeah, how I speak to people, how I interact with people has greatly changed as well, and continues to do so, I say.
And I didn't know if this is really just a general question, but I don't know if if it's a fair question, just in terms of looking at your overall experience of working with different people who are at different points along the journey, so to speak. I'm wondering if have you found a good percentage of people that you've worked with over the years, or do you find them at the point where they are maybe not come to the end of seeking, but maybe there's a recognition that that is imminent at some point? Or I don't know if that makes sense or not. Just getting some sense of where people are at on their journey when you meet them, so to speak, wherever
Oh,
they are.
yeah, that varies greatly. I work with people. I meet them where they are, and so wherever that is varies greatly, depending on the person I'm working with. I have people who come to me who are post awakening, let's say, and they're struggling with the embodiment of that and the living of that. And then I have those that are just on the start of their spiritual journey and everything in between, actually. To me, there was a point in my sort of guidance and teaching where I stopped like those beginning years, I would say I was very, very focused on awakening. I was very, very focused on, right, got to, wake up the world, so to speak. I was
Yeah.
very, had that burning in my heart. And that shifted. And I know that's a funny thing to say, but it shifted to something quite different in these last few years. And it's been very much about honoring and trusting where someone is at on their journey, and really recognizing that my role in all of this is really just someone to walk a while with people, to walk hand in hand as they are moving through their journey, and trusting that the pace and the manner in which their unfolding is happening is entirely perfect, entirely correct, and that it is no one else's responsibility or idea of what that pace should be. And so for me, it's been much more in latter years about supporting people to trust their own pace, their own journey, and ultimately to come to a trust of themselves and to trust their inner guidance, their intuition. And yes, I can support that in them, and hopefully mirror back where there's areas in their life that maybe that's not what's happening. But to me, awakening is a deeply unique thing for each and every one of us. Yes, you can see these sort of generalized stages or places that people generally come to in terms of their recognition, but how that actually feels and looks and tastes in the individual is entirely unique. And I think that's what's become more important to me in these years is to really honor that and to see that it's all unfolding perfectly for each of us.
That is so beautiful, I'm wondering, in terms of people who are in their earlier stages of their journey, to have the ability to work with someone like yourself, and I'm wondering here too, is this, and I love how you said that it's unfolding perfectly just as it is supposed to. So I really do wonder if that seeking has to, that can't be shortcut or short circuited. That is ultimately that seeking, that is something that is a very formative or important part of this journey. And I'm just kind of wondering out loud.
That's a good wondering. Um, a lot is made of seeking. A lot is made of seeking as a negative thing.
Mm.
And I wonder if we could even take a look at seeking as not a negative thing, but a necessary thing to really come to know ourselves. Often we have to go down all these routes that it's like, no, it's not that, it's not that, it's not that, it's not that. And so seeking as just part of the process of awakening itself, and to not get hung up on the identity of being a seeker, but actually to use every impulse as a symptom of that awakening. And so, as to shortcuts, to me, we're not in control of any of this. All of this is unfolding in this perfect way for each of us. However, the paradox of that is also that there are shortcuts, and shortcut is to come to use everything that you encounter, every teaching, every teacher, every technique, every transmission, every satsang, whatever it is, to use that as a mirror and to earnestly come back to a recognition of what is being pointed to. To me, this is the shortcut. The shortcut is to earnestly and curiously attend to what is being pointed to in each and every moment of life, I would say. And spiritual or not spiritual, all of life is pointing oneself back to oneself.
Thank you so much. And where what's coming up for me is I'm thinking about the whole idea of seeking. And I definitely remember, not that this is about me, but just remembering in terms and talking with a lot of people over the years about the seeking. So then that implies, possibly, maybe it doesn't, but I'm thinking it implies, finding something or thinking that I found something, and that romanticizing of that notion. I don't know if any of this resonates, that
Totally.
romanticizing this notion of I finally have found this, only to find that what is searched for. I'm wondering if this resonates, that it ultimately, what is searched for is really never found. I'm almost saying that as a question.
Yeah. What is searched for is discovered to be what you are. And so you never lost that, but it was veiled from you. You were blind to that. And so to me, this is why it's a remembrance. I love to use the word remembrance, because to me, that is what's happening. It's a remembrance of who and what you are. And so we seek out, seek out there. And even these sort of inner techniques of meditation, there's still a subtle idea in there often of, I'm going to discover something that wasn't already here, something that somehow is going to be added to my experience. And actually, to me, it's the opposite. It's an unveiling of that which was already there, an unveiling and a recognition and a remembrance of that which is looking out of these eyes always, the light of being, the light of consciousness, the divine light that you are. It has always been what you are. And yet we misunderstand and misidentify ourselves as these sort of the mind body conglomerate that we call me. And yet we miss what we truly are, who we truly are. And so it's really, to me, just a remembrance of that. And so when that remembrance comes about, that's the finding. It's not a finding as in finding something you didn't have, or picking something up off the street and going, oh, now I have this. It's a finding of that place that you recognize as home, you recognize as self, you recognize as, that which I am cannot be lost. And in that, the seeking tends to fall away.
Yeah, that's, oh my goodness. Yes, that really resonates. And I'm wondering too, as far as I know on some level, and there again, as someone who has been on a journey like this, that it would be wonderful if it would be as easy as just being able to tell someone this and point to it directly. But then I also wonder, is that maybe the paradox that it can't really be pointed to directly, that ultimately this is something that someone has to experience for themselves, however they, if and however they do.
It can be pointed to, but not in words, I would say. It
Oh,
can be
okay.
pointed to energetically. It can be pointed to, and that is a direct recognition. It's not like me pointing it to, it's me holding up a mirror and you feeling what I am speaking of. So it can be pointed to, but it has to stay out of the realm of conceptual. It has to stay out of the realm of understanding, and it has to come into the realm of direct experiencing or direct knowingness. And so in that way, yes, we can't get it in that way. We can't conceptualize. And actually, it's often the conceptualization that brings us further away from that recognition. So all of our ideas of what enlightenment is, what awakening is, what our true self is, it's many times that is the veil, one of the final veils to the recognition of your true nature is often your ideas of what that looks like, what that feels like, what that tastes like, what that is. And so in many ways, it's that needs to go. So yeah, you can't experience this through more ideas, but paradoxically, those ideas carry a transmission underneath the concepts of those ideas. There is a transmission of that, of beingness itself, is pointed to, I would say.
That really does, that one for me is, it really speaks to me, because for many, many years, hearing teachers, sitting with teachers that were pointing at this, what you have been speaking about, and thinking that somehow my understanding conceptually of this was that I somehow was getting this.
Yeah.
It is amazing to me how much time humans can spend, how many years humans can spend actually thinking that they've got this, only to find. And I love how you said that when we finally have to let all those preconceived notions go, all of our ideas about what this is.
Yeah, it's an emptying out, actually. You know, we're so used to living in a world where we're trying to fill up our well of knowledge with stuff, with more stuff, with more stuff, with more stuff. And actually, spiritual awakening is actually the opposite. It's an emptying out, an emptying out, an emptying out. And so we have to sacrifice or surrender all our knowing, all our knowledge, to discover that deep inherent knowingness, which is very different from knowledge. It's, you're not gathering anything, you're not mastering anything, you're not doing anything. In many ways, it's in that emptying out. It's an emptying out of all notions, all ideas, all concepts of who and what you are, and what you're left with then is who and what you are.
Yeah, and that to me is, that is the treasure.
Yeah.
Is what it is that we're left with. Yeah. And I know just the willingness to appreciate that is certainly, and I'm wondering if that resonates with you, just the willingness and openness to appreciating that gift.
Yeah, to fall in love with that, to fall in love with the simplicity of being. And it doesn't require you to be anything or do anything or turn up as anything. It's in that moment, it's just this. The willingness, the ability to sink into and fall in love with just this as you are, this moment, and all that that entails. But fundamentally, to come to love with that.
Yes, and the human tendency in a lot of cases is that it seems so simple, and yet it seems like as humans we, the desire to complicate it, and to get in our own way to actually experience what you've just said.
Yes, and this is the mind. The mind is a beautiful, beautiful, intelligent tool. Um, However, this is above the pay grade of the mind, so to speak. So the mind um, so desperately wants to know and categorize and put boxes around everything and concepts and ideas. Um, and for this, uh, there is no concept that can be described and categorized and known. The mind is at a loss when there's a pure tasting of our nature. The mind is sort of stumped in that way. And so, where we can get comfortable with orientating towards that sense of being with rather than knowing, um, it goes a lot easier. I think it's a smoother process when we understand that that's the nature of the mind, to want to know, and yet where we find ourselves sunken into the deep heart of ourselves. Um, there's room for the mind that wants to know, but at the same time, there is a deeper understanding of the futility of that and the need for the mind to make things very complicated.
That is that for me certainly was a difficult habit to break, and I'm not there yet. I mean, I still find myself at times, old habits, so to speak,
Oh
of
yeah.
those. It's yeah, they tend, and if I'm not careful or not paying attention or not being aware, being present, that it's amazing how I can suddenly wake up and find myself in the midst of believing the mind and beginning to let it make the decisions again, so to speak.
Yeah, we have got so much of our current sort of culture is so supportive of reinforcing that. And so, and we've obviously spent a lifetime maybe lifetimes of this manner in which we interact with life. And so, yes, this is a very deep rut in the road that we find ourselves sort of breaking free of. And yet those smooth surfaces of that road is still there, ready to sort of sink into quite easily. And so, yes, it can be very tricky to continually be vigilant and earnest with our anchor point being towards the heart rather than the mind.
Oh my goodness, yes, yes, thank you. And the other thing, this is just coming up, is actually a surprise for me. These just tend to flow. I don't really go into these conversations with any preconceived notions or any questions that I've just, formulated ahead of time. This is a dimension of this that I have really not ever spoken with anyone about this before. And I don't know if there's anything there, and I'm certainly open to maybe that there isn't, or I don't want to, there's no expectations that you have anything to say about this. But it's kind of like you wake up one day and you find yourself there, so to speak, and experiencing what you have spoken of so eloquently. And how, the question comes up, because as human beings, being social creatures, uh, what does that look like? And so I'm wondering if you had any of these experiences of your own suddenly after these very powerful shifts have taken place. How do you interact with people on a day-to-day basis? uh, and I'm wondering too, if you have, people just in general, people that you mentor, if you find that this is something that comes up, how do I walk back into the world and bring myself and show up again now as I am, as I find myself with possibly much less of myself than I thought I was. How do I do this?
Oh, yes, I get you. That's a very big topic of conversation, I would say. Um, but because the fact is, we are in this world. We are not of this world, but we are in this world. The language I would use is we are light in human form. Yeah. We are consciousness playing out as form. And that is as we're meant to be. Like it's not, there's can be this stage that people go through where there's a subtle denial of the humanity of life, this sort of um, subtle, very, very subtle duality, this subtle separation of I am not this, I'm not this world, this life, this human, this body. And I think that's a very necessary stage people go through. And to lesser and more extents, that's not a set stage. It's just people can find themselves traversing through that for longer and shorter periods. Um, but to me, to be in this world is a really precious gift. Our humanity is the way in which our divinity is expressing itself in this moment. And so, yes, how to now sort of, if you think of the analogy of the caterpillar versus the butterfly, you see the caterpillar interacts with the world in a completely different manner to which the butterfly does. And yet they're totally valid experiences based on, their where they're at in their life. And so it's a very deep learning process, I think, to suddenly be interacting with this world when the who and what you are is now seen in a different light, is now there's been a shift in perspective of that. And yet still there's a body, there's a mind that needs nourishment, that needs looking after, that needs tending to. There's a world, there's relationships, there's, people, there's interactions. And so for me, this is what I would say the more embodiment of awakening is to really learn how to be in this world from the point of view of I am consciousness, and to really live that. And there's no prescription for that. There's no sort of, okay, A plus B equals C. This is how you do that. But I would say that the process that often people walk through is a deconditioning process. And that deconditioning is of all the crusts of those conditions of who and what you thought you were, starting to be seen through and crack open. Um, but then there is a different process of learning to embody and how to be in this world and be true and be honest and be authentic to what spirit is moving through you, what life is moving through you in this way. That is a journey, I think, an unending journey, and an honor, I think. I know that's maybe a strange word to use there, but to me it is a true honor to be human, to be in this world, to live and interact and love, and to feel, to taste, to experience life. Each moment is a way in which we're coming to know ourselves and know life more deeply. And I think this is really precious. I think this is just truly precious. And I think where people struggle with that is where they have ideas of how they should be and what they should be. And so that they're still dealing with that. And I still deal with these things of like these old last vestiges of conditioning that can really stay in the system for quite a long time. So I think yeah, really being slow and patient with ourselves as we learn how to be in this world and truly come to a love of who and what we are.
Yes, that is, yeah, that is beautiful. I really appreciate that. And I wanted to also just, along those lines, just in terms of what you share with the world. And I didn't know, there's no expectations on this. But I think I had mentioned this, but when we communicated a few weeks ago before this, that I discussed, this is how I essentially found out about you is somehow, and I can't even, if I try to remember, I don't want to waste your time, and trying to remember how I discovered your and Martin's podcast. But to me, it is, and I'd love to hear anything that you have to say. And actually, I should stop. I was getting ready to speak about what it means to me, but I wanted to, most importantly, give you the opportunity, if you felt moved or feel moved, to share anything about that and what that means to you.
So I've been with my husband for 20 years, and prior to the awakening shift that we both experienced about 6 months apart, um, he was always, as I mentioned earlier, he was always interested in this stuff, but I really wasn't. And so we really didn't, we connected on many levels, but we didn't particularly connect on this level. And what happened quite unexpectedly was when that shift occurred, suddenly there was these deep conversations that were coming about hours upon hours of us just exploring the nature of reality. And to this day, I mean, we're talking what, it's almost 10 years ago now. To this day, it's like you put us in the same room together and there's one of two things that's going to happen. I mean, other than normal domestic life, which still very much happens, but there's one of two things that are going to happen, even in amongst that normal domestic life: silence or exploring the deep nature of reality. That's where
Interesting.
we meet most
Yeah.
deeply daily. And so the podcast came about through this. We'd been, just having hours upon hours of these conversations. And one day I recorded one, and that was our first episode. Now it took, what, 3 years or something to actually get the podcast going truly, um, which was last year. It really started in earnest. Um, and it's a different mode. It's not quite the same. We're getting there with it. It's always, as soon as you add a third element, which of course is the audience, it changes things. But yeah, that's where it was born from. It was born from the fact that we were having these conversations, and time again, there's like, oh, so and so would love to hear, would be interested in that, or these kinds of conversations started to come up in amongst the deep conversations. So the podcast was born from that. And it's really just us exploring together some of these issues, and often it is related to how we show up and how we are in the world. It's not, we tend to not try and get too abstract. mostly we don't get too abstract between our own conversations. Um, it to me, it's about exploring life. It's exploring what it is to be. And I think that's what the podcast has become for us, is for a place for us to explore that publicly, let's say.
Yes, and I really do honor that, and I will tell you there, and I don't know if there's anything. I don't want to assume that there's anything there, but in terms of this journey, sometimes the sense has been that or the experience that I've had, and I realize I'm just one human being, that it's sometimes this is a journey that is taken alone. And even with other people, we're still on some level taking it alone. I don't know if that, I'm not making that as a statement. That's just been what my experience has been.
Yeah.
But when I listened, what I really got this sense of was that there was this aspect of not feeling alone. In other words, the conversations, and I could say on one level, the conversations to me in my heart have a tremendous value, but then there is also this sense of feeling connected to people who are exploring the nature of reality. And so I just want to honor both of you for, and I'm very glad that you spoke about this, because it does feel like a beacon in the night. I don't know if that's an apt metaphor or not, but it really does.
I really
And yeah.
appreciate I appreciate you saying that, because that's, I think, my hope. My hope is that. And there's this phrase that Martin, my husband, and I use about our relationship often, is alone together. And to me, that summarizes what you've just said there, is alone together. Yeah,
Yeah.
this is a journey that no one else can take for you, and therefore it is lonesome in that way. But we can be alone together, and to have that sense of community is really precious. And it's not that that community, you give away yourself for that. It's actually, that community is a way of coming into yourself more and supporting that. And I think that's what I hope for. That's why I do what I'm doing, is to support people, is to make them feel less alone in this world, that then they're on their own and they're the only one going through that, because they're not. Although it's completely unique, we are all on our journey, and that's the thing that we share, I feel.
Yes, I have so much respect for that, and that phrase "alone together," I feel like that is, and there again, it's not an opinion. It's just I'm just want to express to you how it's resonating with me. I really sense in some ways on this journey, and I realize everyone's journey is different, but this feels very revolutionary. That there
Mm.
is this invitation to be able to actually interact with people in relationships of all kinds,
Yeah.
and to learn how to be alone together. That's really speaking to me. So I just wanted to honor you and tell you that when you said that, I just immediately, that felt very, very true to me.
Beautiful. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's what I was hearing from your words. So I'm glad it resonates. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And I'll make sure, if you would like as well, I will get with you after we stop the recording. I definitely would like to include any information that you would like to share, so that if to make it as easy as possible for people to connect with you. And of course, I would love to also, if you would like to have a link, I can also put a link to the podcast as well, so that people can find that. And my hope is that they do. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, we're very small, so anyone, that new viewers that feel like they want to come in our direction, is very welcome to join. And so yes, that'd be lovely.
Yeah, thank you. And this question comes from not knowing as well. I didn't know if in terms of what you do in terms of bringing people together, I didn't know if you do, particular, as far as gatherings with
Mhm.
people, songs. I just wanted to give you an opportunity if there's anything that you wanted to speak about, if that is something that you do, and what that means to you.
Yes, so I do group meetings. I do a lot of group meetings, actually. And my modalities primarily, sorry, split into two things, and they are both supportive of each other. So I work on the level of satsang. So this is coming together in conversation, coming together in deep exploration of our nature, And it's not an intellectual pursuit. It may start out in the mind with all these questions, but to me, satsang is always coming to a deeper knowingness of ourselves. And so we use speech, we use exploration in this manner to come to know ourselves in the direct experience of it. So that's one modality that I use, and I do satsangs most Sundays at 4 p.m. on Zoom. And then on Wednesdays and also afterwards on Sundays, I do the other modality I use is divine light transmissions.
Hmm.
And so this is a form of Shaktipat. Um, and it's, to me, it is almost akin to, if I could use the analogy of a tuning fork, of a C note tuning fork, and the ability to tune into that C note within ourselves, that divine light within ourselves. So that is a silent modality. It's an energetic modality, and I find they support each other beautifully. And so I do divine light transmissions as well as I frequently do retreats, online retreats and intensives where there's lots of satsang and lots of transmissions a day. So as well as my one-on-one stuff, this is a large portion of my work is group work.
I appreciate you sharing all that, and I do honor it very much. And at this point, I think that's all the questions that are coming up for me. I wanted to give you just a moment. There's no expectation that there's anything that you want to share, but I just wanted to give you a little bit of space and time in case that is in case that is in case that is something that's moving you.
The one thing that feels very relevant somehow that's coming up is this sense of wherever each of us finds ourselves, whatever we're drawn to, whatever path, whatever teaching, whatever modality, technique, to see all of this as a symptom of consciousness waking up to itself, the self waking up to itself. I think that's something that I see gets missed with people a lot. They think that there's this idea of cause and effect. Oh, if I do this, I'm going to get that. And actually to see the perfection of how you are inspired and moving in your life is the very symptom of awakening occurring. So the fact that you'd be inspired to listen to a podcast like this or inspired to sit down and meditate, to me, is the symptom of awakening occurring already in your heart. And I think that that's something really important to acknowledge, because in that way we can see that there is no right or wrong path for us. We are all, every inspiration, every movement, every moment of turning within to discover who and what you are is the path.
Thank you so much. It has been wonderful getting a chance to, it's been wonderful to meet you, to hear from you. And I am just incredibly appreciative of you taking the time and sharing everything that you did. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you for doing this podcast and sort of putting all of this out into the world. I really appreciate that.
Thank you so much.